Okay, but exciting updates from Subnet 19 this week. Look forward to hearing about it. And for everyone, if anyone is new, you can always type questions in the chat. Barbo, I saw you wrote in the general chat asking about testnet. And
yeah, I saw Kat's response, so we're pretty excited about that because we were like, oh, where do we post now?
Yeah, exactly. It's common to use testnet like internally, but I don't think miners usually are so keen on actually running things on testnet. They prefer to just wait until subnet has like been registered and run there.
Right, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I understand why they may not want to spend time and resources on that, but I want to at least like post it, and if anybody decides they want to, then they can go for it.
Yeah, like actually, I might take that back because sometimes there is like one or two miners that reach out and say like, "Hey, do you need help developing the subnet?" And they like run miners, and of course they hope that they will become expert at the subnets by the time of launch. So yeah, it's
Right.
yeah, always worth to
Yeah,
give it a try.
it could definitely give them a leg up, or at least like make sure that it'll work for their hardware and stuff, and then it'll help us with benchmarking and everything. So that'd be nice.
Nice. By the way, what subnet are you building? Is it any that I might have heard about, or?
Oh yeah, so we were 29, but our emissions were quite low. We were doing 3D generation, but we are, basically testing different 3D generation models. If you know anything about 3D, we were using Nerf models. Now we're using Gaussian splats. And so basically the quality is improved, but kind of want to make sure that like both the miner and validator code can switch over to that other generation method.
Oh, that's interesting. So you basically tell the miner to run this model in this way, and you just check that they use it correctly, or is it some other reward mechanism?
Yeah, pretty much. So we are trying to, I mean, our goal is ultimately to write the code for them to run different types of models, because the outputs are different. Like Nerf models produce meshes, whereas Gaussian models have point clouds. And so they're just different types of outputs that need to be validated differently, and kind of generated differently. So we want to basically try to ensure that everything could be run and validated. It'd be nice to be able to run, like, have one mechanism that evaluates everything.
Yeah, that's the goal, that you should make it evaluate everything. But the more general you make it, the harder it is to make sure it runs like correctly and evaluates fairly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I see Namori and Magmachin both are ready, or sorry, that's earlier. So thank you for that information about your subnet. We can absolutely return to that, but I don't want to keep Namori longer than necessary. So Namori, you want to tell us a bit about the update to Subnet 19?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah, what we've done is we're trying to like reinvent the wheel a little bit. We're trying to introduce basically a whole different type of architecture where instead of the what the majority of subnets do right now is focus on sort of like POC style, focus on validators run some cool model and the miners run some cool model and we just check the output and it's okay, and it's okay for that validator miner setup, but it's not super optimized for for large scale usage. So what we've tried to do is design, this architecture where it's built around being able to extract value out of miners directly. So the primary use case of the subnet is to get as many requests per second out of these miners as you can, and it's pretty much all image operations. So there's text image to image, control nets with Scribble, there's in-painting, there's upscaling, there's clip embedding, so you can do image search. There's like a whole host of things on Safety Checker as well. Whole host of things on there, basically for miners to perform these actions, right? And then validators, what validators are fundamentally is they are the gateway, right, to this network. So they have their own API server. They're able to make API keys using the CLI. In the future, they'll make them on a dashboard instead. So they're able to make these API keys. They're able to sell them to whoever they want, give them to whoever they want, allow anyone that they want to allow access to this network, to these miners. And when using just normal HTTP, so I can just post to some validator using like all the normal methods, exactly the same as you would go to OpenAI, for example. I would go to a Subnet 19 validator, post a request to them. I want an image of a turkey or whatever, and then the validator will construct that in the dendrite form. So with the Bittensor code, they would go to the miner in exactly the same way as a synthetic query would look. Then they would get the result, return it to the normal user over HTTP again. So then the normal user doesn't need to know anything about Bittensor if they don't want to. But then the key thing is, that query gets scored organically. And in fact, the more every query has the potential to be scored organically. And that can take many forms. The simplest one is just a random chance, like with 1%, 5% each time, whatever. And so each query is scored organically, which means the focus is completely on organic traffic. What we're trying to do is enable validators to sell as much of their bandwidth as possible. And the way miners won't ignore them is, one, because all queries get scored, right, or have the potential to be scored. So I can't just ignore you, otherwise I'm going to get a smaller score than my nearest competitor. And that, of course, like if I'm going to get absolutely bombarded by a validator, eventually I'm going to say, okay, I've got enough points for you. I'm going to move on. Like I'm going to focus on the other validators who aren't questioning me enough. Which is why this prioritization mechanism, which we put a white paper out and did a bunch of research into, basically shows that the optimal solution for miners, the game theory robust solution for miners, is to prioritize validators, according to their percentage of delegation that they have. So let's say like Keith has like, I don't know what it is, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's like 8% of the total delegation or something. So let's say he has 8% of all validation delegation, then miners, the best thing they can do is give Keith 8% of the total queries that come through. So that allows Keith to say, sorry, Keith, I've just used you as an example here because you're a validator. Oh, he's not even in the call anymore, he's gone. I was using him because he was in the call, but he's gone. Let's say Mog then, and Mog has 10% or whatever. The miners will prioritize Mog for his 10%, and then if Mog was using lots more, then other validators would get priority. What that allows to happen, which is like the really important thing, is that validators sort of have an amount to sell. So it has a monetary value, their bandwidth. So it allows them to go and have a marketplace where they can sell it, where people can bid on it, and where they can actually get value of like what they deserve, basically. So they can extract value out of the subnet, not just in TAO, but in real money as well. So what we're doing, all that structure is basically to enable that and to facilitate that. So like we're trying to go out of this POC stage, which a few subnets are doing this as well, trying to go out of this POC stage of okay, we can get miners and validators working together, but trying to open up to the big wild world. And there's no reason arbitrary models can't be run using this structure. The whole structure's got nothing to do with image models in particular. The only thing that's special there is the reward model of how you check images are the same, but in theory you could replace that with any image reward model you want or any reward model you want. So that's like the high level, the subnet specific stuff. And then there's also, apps to be built on top of this. So Corcel is building straight on top of this using a validator. So a validator is directly selling their bandwidth to Corcel, like full disclosure, the validator's Mog right now, but we're going to be working with other validators as well. So multiple validators are going to be selling bandwidth to whoever they want. They don't have to choose Corcel, they can choose whoever. And Corsair has an image studio that's just come out using Subnet 19 only to generate all this sort of stuff.
That is
And
really cool.
got a-
Yeah.
I was going to say question, and this is of course open source, and how easily can other subnets look at this and decide whether they want to integrate it into their subnet?
Yeah, nice question, Rob. What made you think of that? Yeah, exactly. All of this is open source, and I alluded to it earlier that there's nothing special about image generation models here. This can be used in any subnet, and obviously all of this is open source. Anyone can take this, and we're going to be trying to pull this out into a package in the very near future to try and make this so like maybe it's the new not the new subnet template, but maybe a subnet template where people can say, okay, I want to build my subnet for organic traffic on day one. We're trying to like help address that criticism of Bittensor that, oh, it's really hard to get value out of Bittensor, or oh, it's really hard, it doesn't do anything. Like we're trying to address that fundamentally.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I agree with you. Like the first natural step with Bittensor is to create
Exactly.
things where basically the miner run things very efficiently, using maybe hardware that wouldn't be used otherwise, and like provide it as a product. And it's actually interesting. We should maybe talk about this more afterwards. It's almost identical to how we're working on niche image, Subnet 23. It's also focusing on images, and validators can currently sell their bandwidth to whoever they want, but we also have the option to sell with us. Probably, I think the market is big enough for both of us. AI is not a small pond; it's a big ocean. But yeah,
exactly. What we'll be doing is eventually, I mean, between us and between many people, there'll be the best way of doing this sort of thing, right? Like what we're both trying to do is come up with the best sort of marketplace structure that's possible to enable this large scale inference, and it'll evolve between us, between all subnets over time. That what we're trying to do, and what hopefully every subnet will eventually do, is run these structures to get the most out of Bittensor. So hopefully we'll all win, and we'll end up with every subnet sort of following the same sort of thing of, okay, value is first. We need to prioritize value out of Bittensor as well as just showcasing use cases within Bittensor.
I would say not all. There is an interesting thing where obviously when you build an inference subnet or a subnet that's generating commodity like storage, then what your subnet produces is the commodity to which you want to make available to the largest amount of people, users possible. Amount of users, physical, real, organic users using your subnet or using sort of dialing into the commodity of your subnet is your measure of success, essentially. But not all subnets are like that, actually. Because if you look at something like Subnet 6, it's not for other users to dial in. It's in fact, it's for new who are training the model to get the best model out of it. So it's almost like the subnet is producing a singular product for them, which they can then be used in any other format. And the same, very similar, I guess, with Subnet 8, is that the product is used by Taoshi, by Arash, rather than everyone else dialing in and being able to, or the subnet is pushed for everyone else to dial in and grab the product.
The important point there is the focus on value, right? Like what we're trying to shift is every subnet will be producing value, right? They're the only ones that will live on. And for subnets which primarily get value from a miner running a model for you, those take the form of inference based, right? Then you've got new, where the value is how good is the model that comes out. You've got storage, which is basically the same. How much storage can I pay for? You've got Horde or 27 of how much compute can I rent. It's all still going to be about value you can get out of these things, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think like inference subnets, there's nothing stopping an inference subnet, like for example for image models, to also combine elements of competitions. Like, you can also run an open model, like any model, and you will get rewarded for that. And then it's not only about like running the model cheaper and faster and such. It's also then about development. So you can also get interesting combination of elements there that could be hard to achieve outside of the Bittensor ecosystem.
Exactly. That's the true beauty of these structures, right? Is that we don't have to put our reward model to you need to run the same image as me. That image reward model could be anything. It could be the better image reward model we've got, you might start to get more and more interested in fine-tune image generation models or whatever. And if you've already got the inference structure built around it, then you can sell it straight away.
Yeah, and also one thing I want to comment for everyone in the call, Namore, Mag, and I, we have all been talking about these things before. So even if we're on different subnets, we learn from each other, and it's beneficial to have multiple people working on building subnets compared to if it was just one subnet or people working alone in the dark. So yeah, I just want to highlight that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said, we're all building subnets to some degree, right? And what we're trying to do is currently we're trying to build the best inference subnets and try and work out how it is we can get value out of Bittensor as good as possible. And as many minds on that as possible is really good, I think.
And I think what a lot of people don't realize that, like you say, Victor, that we're doing together, and we often speak about and have private calls between us, is we're trying to ready this network to get it to where we need it to be for the products that we wish to deploy in the state that we wish to find ourselves in 6 months or a year, that the network supports that. So it's the foundation have stepped back in some ways. What was the birth of subnets really opened the door to everybody building in their own way, and it's amazing to see lots of people going in lots of different directions, and it's getting even more interesting now. There have been quite a few new subnets popping up with very different mechanisms, not just doing things the template way, and everyone's trying to push Bittensor towards a level that when as Namare says, to extract the most value, but also to be really usable by a large amount of people. Someone I was talking to earlier today, and I sort of said, well, how many people do you imagine in 6 months using the Bittensor network, not knowing that they are using the Bittensor network? This is an interesting metric to think about and to plan for, and that's something I think we've always had very much in our focus.
We also got a comment in the chat about saying there's also something to 5. How big of a model can I train? I'm not sure exactly what he was referring to, but I thought
I think he was referring to we was talking about getting value out of subnet and what value does a subnet have. And I think he was saying that subnet 25 is okay. Bring along your model or whatever, and we'll basically train it for you. I guess that's the value proposition. We'll get as much. We can train as big a model as possible. So there's still value out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. And just to speak about value for a second. Sorry, I'm on my bike. Speak about value for a second, right? One of the biggest companies out there trying to do this. They've been going for 7 years. And they raised $50 million. And their software isn't open. I haven't seen what they're doing. And so here we are, right? Team of 4 people, right? We plugged into this network, and we trained the model, right? It's small, it's tiny GPT, but it's trained, and we're training GPT-2, and that's that to me, that's pretty amazing, that can happen. And yeah, let's say we train a model, and we're re-architecting to be able to train models in the 700, 800, 1 trillion parameter scale, right? And let's say we do that, and then we make it open. And then we do the inferencing, maybe with our friends in other subnets or even by ourselves, and we make it open. So my mom in Africa doesn't need to have $20 a month to utilize the best machine learning models, right? GPT-4 is already behind a paywall. The top 15, top 10 models in the world are proprietary. And if this resource is so important, then I think it behooves us, right, to figure out a way to make sure that that's available freely and openly. And so really, to me, that's what inspires me about this network. Okay, the end. Sermon over. I'll go on mute and finish riding my bike. Yee!
It's interesting. I think Bittensor is a perfect combination of competition and collaboration, because anyone can launch their own subnet, try out their ideas, but instead of the subnets actually competing, it's more like a collaboration, because you can benefit from the other people that succeed with their ideas. since it's all open source.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I wonder if we will get like a few categories where it will be like inference networks will be one category, and then we will have like product building, or like with that I mean like just train one big model or create one specific product for one like for one type of use case, sort of. That can be like training a huge model, or it can be like a combination of models for like Bitcoin price prediction that will be used by one company. Or
Yeah, exactly. I think Bitcoin, touched upon something lovely as well there. It's the beauty is that it's completely open, right? Everything's open source here. Everything's usable by anyone. So it's not just, I can get inference out of a model. It's, I can get inference out of a model. I can see all the code and I can see what's being ran. It's beautiful.
shall we move over to the next point, the subnet churn that has become very apparent with
Yeah, this is an interesting one actually. There's a lot of different takes on this, but obviously there's been a spree of subnet registrations. 13th, 14th, 15th, 16. We didn't get the 17. We got the 18. We didn't get the 19th, 20th of February. So that is 2, 4. That's 6 subnets in 8 days have been registered, and it's very interesting because what's happened so far, other than actually now 32 identified themselves as bit audit, and 30 Giga have identified them as the game. I tweeted it and I've forgotten what it was already. Hold on one second, let me pull this one up. It is called Infinite Games. The others remain unknown, and what's happening and what people have realized is that the cost to register a subnet is if you have the funds, it's possible because you're not losing the funds, and you have 7 days of immunity. This is something that people have to. This is important to point out. There's 7 days of immunity, and so what's happening is if you're registering 7 or 8. You can keep those bottom, so the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all have less than 0.2% emissions, but it doesn't matter. As long as they're in immunity, you're going to kick out the lowest of the bunch not in immunity, which are those with sort of 1.3% emissions. So there's been a big churn, and those that are getting kicked out are just registering straight away again. So obviously the ability to have 300 or 400 tau that it takes to do the registration is not an obstacle. And the controversial thing that's happening today, or has been noted, and no one had really thought, I don't think anyone thought about before, probably needs addressing, is that once a subnet is deregistered, the new subnet that takes their slot keeps the emissions of the, not as in keeps any tau, but keeps the same emission weights as the previous, because of course a validator sets weights to the subnet 0 to define the emissions, and these are not reset when there is a dereg. And I'll step over the line and maybe be controversial, but I feel that it should be. I feel that when a subnet is deregistered, its emissions should go back to 0. Because it produces uncomfortable situations where, and I should clarify this. Actually, I should be very fair and clarify this, because a post that I made on Telegram, that I was slightly jumped to a conclusion and was then informed of what really happened. And I saw subnet 28 register, and registrations. I went to register and it was closed. And I saw Roundtable 21 on there. It was the only validator on there, and because it still had the emissions of the previous subnet, they were raking in a tasty amount of tau, which got my alarm bells ringing. Thankfully, I have good communication with them, so I contacted them, and they said, "Well, no, we have an automated script that if we get deregistered, it fires up the registration." Well, fair enough. That was hats off to that. It's a very prudent thing to do. So they had managed to nab themselves a registration the moment the subnet was registered. And then the subnet owner had clearly closed registration, meaning that they were getting I can't say unfair, but a larger portion of emissions for a subnet that technically had not had emissions assigned to it in its current form, shall we say. Shut up now. That's what's happening. And people have been talking quite a lot about it, so that's why we thought we'd bring it up and see if anyone's got any thoughts, comments, questions. If people think that emissions should be zeroed or not on registration or deregistered.
I think it's
What do you think, Victor?
I think it would simplify things for validators, because I think all validators would agree, like, yeah, if a subnet is deregistered, we don't want to give it the same emission that we gave to the subnet that was registered. I have a hard time believing like someone say like, oh, we give 5% of the emission to this subnet, and if it gets deregistered, like, I don't think any validator would want to give 5% to any arbitrary new subnet that they don't even know about.
Well, the fun thing that I could do now, if I get in there and register a subnet tomorrow at whatever time the registration thing comes over, 7:24 in the morning, I get up early, I register a subnet, I grab myself the first key, and then I close registrations. I'm only locking up 300 tower, whatever it is, to register it. I then run my validator on there, running just some default code and setting weights. And until other people realize and take the emissions off, I'm going to make 30, 40 tower a day. It's not bad. I'm not suggesting anyone do it, but I'm just stating that that's the gamification that is available to anyone that, and this is why I think it's an issue that probably needs to be addressed.
Like you're like validator is kind of a public figure, but I think another validator that is not like reliant on staking in the same way might also register something, register their validator, stop registrations, and assign 100% of their weights to that subnet.
It's increasing the weights then to that subnet would probably be a very controversial. I must say, in Roundtable 21's defense, they had not set or changed any weights in there at all, and there was not a malicious activity in any way. So I may have said it smells fishy in my comment on a closed group that I think someone screenshotted, but no, they were in no way doing anything nefarious. And actually, they've been doing a lot of things recently that has made myself and another validator sort of tip our hats to them and be like, yeah, that's quite clever, and then copy their tactics. And so having an automated registration script for a subnet the moment it's registered is obviously is very clever and very necessary as a validator, because we do need to grab the keys before the miners start to pile in. And so it's hats off to them in that sense. But
that makes a lot of sense.
Let's see what happens.
It's almost like validators should get a chance to get the first 32 spots or something. It should be reserved for 24 hours, just to make sure that validators actually can get on a subnet and it's not blocked for them. Because then that would also kind of solve the problem with weights remaining. It would be, or at least it would be less problematic if anyone could register, or any validator could register to a new subnet.
Like a cold start for a subnet where they get 24 hours to get on, and potentially the only person with miners would be the subnet owner, and emissions are recycled, or they exist. But I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we could look at this, and how, I mean, at the moment, the cold start mechanisms for subnets have become very, very competitive. I've been providing this information to people who've been asking that now when you launch a subnet, you need to have your subnet fully operational with your incentive mechanism or reward mechanism working and bulletproof, and have dropped your first bit of product or serious marketing before day 7 to give enough people or validators time to understand it and assign weights. Otherwise, 7 days, you're out of there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're getting to a point where we have actually more people wanting to have a subnet and having the like tau required to create a subnet than we have slots. So it's now that it's really like starting to become a competition to just hold on to I guess it was true for 2-3 weeks ago also, but it's even more apparent now. Because still 2-3 weeks ago, it were still some subnets that's been around with very low emission for a long time. But now it's like a pretty constant churn. It seems like
it's the constant churn, and what we end up is with seven new subnets that are fighting to get over the 1.4% emissions, and they've got to fight and launch something that makes them better than what have we got? Better than Horde, transcription, compute, MapReduce, and healthcare. They've got to get ahead of those at 1.4%. Otherwise, they're not going to last past 7 days. I mean, you can keep recycling the keys. Obviously, you can keep registering again, but it's also, you'll find this when people want to register, the subnets were getting snapped up the moment that they were available. I did note the other day that someone was actually running a subnet registration script. Believe it or not, it's not just miners now, or for UIDs for miners and validators. People are competitively registering subnets as well.
Is it once every 24 hours that is maximum?
Yes. I believe it's epochs though, so I don't think it's exactly 24 hours. I'm not sure it's exactly 24 hours. And when you look at the timestamps, I think it'll be slightly off.
Yeah, okay, but it's a good estimate. So then we know that it's about seven networks that will be churning, no matter what we do. No, but of course we can do things, but that's the state of the thing, that 7 will be recycled unless price really takes starts increasing. Now it's actually at 652 tau, so maybe it's starting to become out of budget. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but it's happening.
It goes down very quickly though. You wait 2 days. It was 600 and something, so it was registered as 600 on Friday, but by Sunday it was only 300.
Yeah,
so
but that might
weekend.
lower the
It
churn.
does come down quite quickly.
That might lower the churn to maybe like 4 subnets that are constantly churning instead of 7.
Well, no, you still get that churn of 7. It's maybe 1, 2, 3.
Because otherwise, like if it takes 2 days for the price to come back to the original level, if it's more the registration over a long time than one every 2 days, then price will continue to increase. And at some points, it should hit like a max price where people are like where 4 people are willing to re-register subnets.
Well, we've got 6 at the moment, and the next one to be chucked out, if you put let's post a link on here so people can see what I'm looking at. I am here, and I have it ordered by emission. So by ordering that by that table by emission, you can see that the lowest one is subnet 28, but they were registered today, so obviously they're not getting chucked out. And then the next one below that, 7 days back from today, will be the 13th. So subnet 24 will be the next to go. Now, we've had no announcement as far as I'm aware, no communication. So whoever registered subnet 24 didn't deploy in time, and maybe I'm wrong. Correct me. I might go and check if subnet 24 has claimed anything. Or Automator. Sorry, I'm wrong. But Automator will be gone in 24 hours, and then the next one to go will
Assuming
be
someone registered. Price is pretty high as right now.
Assuming someone registers, yes. The price is high, but if you have that, you get it back. So it's it's a zero risk investment.
But I don't think anyone has registered at this current price since like the start. So it will probably be at least like 2 days. I don't know. Maybe someone will register before that, but historically, and of course, more people are recycling now than ever. So we might have a new record registration price.
I say 19th of January, 6:37. 6:37 on the 19th of January. No one's gone over the 6:37 yet.
But 6:37, that was after the price went up. So someone registered at 300 something.
Yeah, you're right.
The highest someone registered is around 400, I think.
Can we take a vote? Can I remove on Tau stats on the subnet registration chart? Can I remove those first 2 days when the price went up to 8,000 so that the data looks so much easier to read? Because those first 2 days make the rest of the data so much harder to understand. I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah,
subnet
sounds
registration
good.
data from the first few days.
Yeah. So how will this play out in the future? Like, probably this will be addressed. For example, the subnet tokens would allow for more subnets to exist without making life difficult for validators. Because the reason, or I think the main reason right now for not wanting 64 subnets is that one, we actually want there to be some competition over subnet slots, because that ensures that everyone that has a subnet is actually doing like a good job. Then the level of competitiveness, that can be debated and people might have different opinions. But the second reason is that we don't want to increase subnets right now is that it also takes more time and resources for validators. Because ideally, a validator wants to read up on the subnet, know, like, is this a good subnet? Should I give any weight to this subnet? Or is it something I think is bad and should not give weights to? And you have to run a GPU or a CPU or something on the server. And of course, that varies different from different subnets, but 32 is already a lot to manage, and 64 I can imagine would like require like a full-time dedicated person. And if you have, I don't know, 20, 25 validators or something like that, big validators, around 29 with 10,000 or more. Now, that's a lot of full-time people if you want to scale it up to that much, if we require every validator to be on every subnet.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do think that the one thing that Dynamic Tau will fix is this issue of emissions left over. Dynamic Tau will make sure that a subnet will be reset each time. So that is one very useful aspect, for sure.
Yeah, and it should solve the subnet churn problem too, right? Because we can increase the number of subnets with less drawbacks.
Yes, I think.
If someone in the chat has any argument against for why I'm wrong, please share. But I think that's how it should work. Yeah, so it will be interesting to see like how it goes. There was some pushback against it. Yeah, Keith has a thought.
Yeah, I'm thinking about dynamic tau and what would happen if you increase the subnets, let's say, to 64, and then you just allowed the market to sort itself out. I'm wondering, like, how much of the emissions on each of the subnets would be attributed to inflows of tau versus outflows, because if you had a subnet that you sort of like, created your own little cabal on the mining side, and, you didn't, really the only outflow of tau would be validators then that were able to buy in, who were then, taking themselves essentially out of the subnet through the subnet token, and you were owning most of the miners. I think you could get pretty competitive with the rest of the field if you had the ability to do that. What do you think about that?
You mean that someone might want to create their own subnet and try to like jack up the price of the subnet token and that way receive more emission? Is that?
Yeah, and I mean specifically through owning most of the UIDs within that subnet and not letting any of them out through the pool, or at least creating a system where the only outflow of subnet token would be through the validators who are participating that aren't part of that, cabal or whatever within the subnet. And I could see that being a significant, risk that would be a strategy to put yourself in a position to gain some emissions versus the rest of the field, which would, when they have a healthy, diverse, and maybe even compute or GPU requirements on the equipment side for miners or validators, you could have a significant outflow on a subnet, that wouldn't have one if you were kind of running it yourself, if that makes sense.
My first thought is then that, well, if you build up this subnet token and you get a lot of it, but in the end you're not making a valuable subnet, would the tokens that you earn on your subnet where you have a cabal, would those tokens actually be worth something? Or would whenever you decide to sell, you would drop the price down? I'm not sure about that. That's just my initial thought that what might happen. Mog, maybe you have a better understanding of this question.
I try to avoid this particular line because so much about the dynamic tower and how the tokens play out is unknown. So initially we sat there and thought, you might be able to gain your subnet by doing this, and we entertained all sorts of hypothetical theories why a subnet owner might be disincentivized to continue development of a subnet beyond essentially an apex of emissions that they would see, how things differ depending on whether a subnet owner had access to initial capital or not. There's all these different theories that play out, but without defined parameters for dynamic tower, I really don't think we're speculating on speculation. So yeah, it's hard for me. It's hard to come up with any sort of concrete theories.
Yeah, I think that before anything is implemented, there will be like some robust analysis of it. So I'm not that worried about there being big exploits, at least not ones that are not patchable. But again, it's maybe too early to even say that because we don't know enough concept even, and especially I don't know enough about it.
Yeah, it's more of just a game theory question, as far as like the inflows and outflows for each of the subnets. And if you were to keep a subnet like static with no outflows versus one that had inflows and outflows, like what would the impact be? But you're right, there's really no way to like crystal ball that whole thing. It's just an interesting thought that I had, mostly because each of the subnets, it's like it's individual, like, fortress almost compared to the others, and whereas now we don't have something like that since everybody shares the same token.
Yeah, it would be interesting to learn the answer to that question, but I don't think we can answer it right now. Yeah, do we have any more questions or comments?
I'll share one more just on the subnet churn. From a validator, perspective, I can just say that like most of my time is spent like managing less than 5 or 7 subnets maybe, and a lot of them, the ones that run well, continuously run well. So I think that there'll be this sort of movement towards stabilizing the effort that goes into keeping your validator running through things like auto update, or a lot of some newer subnets are using like Docker to do some of the features that normally would have been done with like PM2, for example. And that for me, I think will evolve into hopefully less time spent managing the ecosystem from a like a spinning up a new subtensor or keeping it running or doing software updates. So I'm looking forward to that development, in addition to just like subnets expanding their capabilities for the ecosystem, but making it easier for validators to stay registered from a time perspective. I also think that as we move into dynamic Tau and the validator pool widens to a couple hundred different validators instead of just a dozen or two now, that'll be a necessity, because you'll have a lot of new validators that are really not sure how to do what they're doing.
And it's very interesting. So I guess maybe with the current system, it sounds like it could be possible to increase the number of UIDs, assuming that like subnet developers got highly incentivized to make it simple for validators. Like if it was super easy on each subnet, we could probably have 64. It sounds like, but the problem is those that are not super easy, and yeah, maybe those should be I don't know, disincentivized.
Yeah, and I would say like a good example of it is Subnet 19 that just launched, and I see that Namare is in here. The way that one works now, to spin it up from a validator side, he actually gives you like a config file. You just type in your subtensor address, your wallet names. You're not even running custom commands anymore. You're just running a generic command for the auto update script, and I see everybody kind of eventually moving in that direction to kind of like foolproof the validation process.
Yeah, that's absolutely 100% where I think we are heading and where we should be heading.
Glad you liked it, Keith.
Yeah, it's open for anyone who wants to comment something. I have Mr. Bean in the chat. If there are no more questions or thoughts, then maybe it's time to round it off. But yeah, if anyone has any final things they want to say, speak now or be forever silent.
I mean, since I have a lot of experts here, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can somebody tell me a little bit about community projects and like what's their story and like how do they kind of work and like how do they fit in with subnets that are offering core value propositions as well, which are very similar. Well, could be similar if you depending on how you imagine it. I'd just love to learn a little bit about that.
Do you know about? Do you mean community projects in general or a specific one?
No, like there's a whole community project application form, right? There's a whole community project application form that has requirements for what you need to run a community project. That and that's like.
That's by
I'd
the
love
Tau.
to.
Is that by the Tau community or?
Yeah. So like, what's the story there, and what do people think about that? Am I making sense or no?
I think I'm not an expert, but we can maybe bring someone on from there some other time. But it's basically.
Should I save you? I don't think Victor or myself know what community form you're referring to. So no,
Really?
I'm not sure. And
let me. Okay, so well, if you go on the Tau community, not Bittensor, but Tau community, have these community projects, and if you go on the community, there's a community project application form that you can fill. Tau community projects, and you can have a community project that people can back. You have to be a running validator. So I just thought it was interesting, and because it's another way, like you propose a project and people can fund you. So I see an interesting connection there. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically one of the ways to become a validator is to start a validator and apply for funding. And the Tau community they have this form. I didn't actually know about this, that they had it in the chat, but I've heard that they have processes for that. And support new people to get initial.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. It's due to the Bittensor Tau staking functionality that the validators you stake with get 18% of the validator tax, 18% of the emission, and so they use this to fund different projects. We can see in the community projects they have also as Tau Stats, Neuro Internet, Orcell, Tau Bridge, Gigacorp, PR Validator, and it's just a support system for getting funding as a validator. Does that answer your question? I don't think I can explain anything more because I don't know more.
Yeah, I would say it does. I think it's interesting because we may not be able to raise the funds initially, right? To fund a subnet. That's a great way to do it. But there's still a challenge in that. Yeah, if somebody comes in, they have a really good idea. It's not as fluid to propose it because they still have a barrier to entry that it needs to be this big validator. So the area I thought, oh, this is interesting. It could be tweaked. It could be slightly different. And then we are truly in competition for the brightest ideas, right? Because anybody with the brightest idea have a real shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. I think we'll run it off there, and we'll have the next Teacher Tuesday in 2 weeks. Thank you all for joining, and hope to see you next time. And also, if you have any private questions, you can always DM as well.